Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. Today, it was my pleasure to interview Mauro Porcini.
My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Mauro is the Chief Design Officer at PepsiCo. He's also written a brand new book, which I read, and it's powerful, titled The Human Side of Innovation, and the subtitle is The Power of People in Love with People. And I tell you what, we get into that in this interview. We talk about leadership. We talk about attracting the right people to your team. We talk about culture. We talk about how to live a successful life based on respect, based on kindness. And Mauro is a great example of someone who rose to his leadership level, and he did it through, yes, getting results, but getting results through respect and kindness and developing a culture around respect and kindness. I tell you what a great voice to have out there. Now, if you're watching this interview on my YouTube channel, then I humbly ask you to subscribe and make sure you click that notification bell so that you're the first to be notified every time I come out with a motivational message or a success interview like this. If you're watching this on Rumble, then thank you for joining me over there. And if you've downloaded the podcast from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or one of the other platforms, thank you for being a part of my community. And if you haven't joined the Unleash Your Greatness Within community, I invite you to do so. I get the privilege of interviewing high achievers, thought leaders, New York Times bestselling authors, celebrities, professional athletes, and more. And it was just great to have Mauro Porcini on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. And I know I'm pronouncing his name a little bit wrong, but let's just jump right into it. Mauro, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You almost pronounced my name right. You are almost perfect.
All right, restate it for the audience then. How do you say it right?
Mauro.
Mauro.
But I am so used to, actually you did a very good job. Usually people butcher my name in all possible ways, but because I do the same with theirs and many other words in English, I never get offended.
Oh, that's hilarious. I tell you, my last name, Hoisington, people butcher that all the time. But you know what? You even write about it in your book. Don't take things too seriously. Don't take things personally, right? So this is awesome. I am grateful to have you on the show today. I read your book. Whew, heavy, good, rich. I mean, I wrote this down.
I'm glad you say also good. At the beginning, heavy, I was getting worried. But
no.
I'm joking.
I know. But here's what I was thinking. I wrote this down. This book really touched my heart because it's not only about innovation, which obviously the book is, and design and so forth. But really what I found personally reading your book was that it was really about leadership, relationships, and life. And so, wow, we're going to get into some really rich content here that I think people can really get a lot from. And especially if we put little clips out of some of the things you say, I think you're very, very clear. I almost think of it as every company should have your book and then give it to all the employees and say, in the second half of the book, read the whole book, but the second half of the book, this is the type of an employee you want to be to create the culture that will help our company or organization succeed. That's what I got from the book. And I want you to get into that a little bit later. But before we do that, would you give our audience a little bit of your background?
I am Italian, as you can hear from my accent. I was born in the north of Italy from parents from the south. So I talk about this in the book from the very beginning.
That's right.
I'm suspended between two different cultures. There was a lot of racism between the north and the south of Italy, especially when I was growing up. And I was very comfortable in this suspended position, not being really from the north, not being really from the South. I grew up in this humble family where the most important things were the values of kindness, being a good person, and education, culture, knowing things. For my parents, the idea of wealth and fame were not goals, were actually the opposite, were threats for their children and for the journey of their children in life. So this is how I start. My mother was working in finance, but she hated it and she left very soon to stay close to the family. And she spent her life writing poems and thoughts of any kind. My father is an architect, but he's been always a painter inside. He studied art and he's been painting all his life. Still today, in his 80s, he paints every day. And together they've been publishing 8 books, but self-published, like just for them, with the paintings of my father, the thoughts of my mother. I say all of this because I didn't realize back then, but that kind of education really informed the person I am today. And between my childhood, where they were there and they were guiding me, and where I am today, in the middle, there is all the experimentations and, different directions that I took in life, and hurting myself and doing my mistakes and my missteps to then find back those values that really were inside me all along, and that saved me many situations, and that today I become a very big ambassador of. Once again, culture and kindness are 2 of the key pillars of the book, of what I do in these companies, in PepsiCo, and in my life in general. Fast forward, to where I am today. I am in New York City. I am the chief design officer of a big corporation, of PepsiCo. And everything started from the little town outside of Milan. I studied design in Italy. I learned English late in my early life, but late. When I was 23, I studied French at school. I moved to Dublin with an exchange program to study design in Dublin in a language that I didn't know, to try to learn a language. And we can talk about why. You read the book, you know why I moved to Dublin, and my mentor, pushed me to go there. And then I came back. I started working in Philips design on wearable technologies. That was also the topic of my thesis. And then I left to join a big Italian celebrity. Imagine today in the United States, like if you meet Jay-Z or Kanye West or Beyonce, you decide to build a company with them. I created my own agency working on the world of digital, experimenting in the world of digital. I was a designer. The guy was coming from the music world, but we were experimenting together. That the experimentation lasted 3 years. It was really too early. We're thinking about projects like crypto, what later on was called cryptocurrency, for instance, but we talk about the year 2000. The cryptocurrency were invented 7 or 8 years later. Right. We closed the company and I bumped into 3M, the tech company, big corporation from Minnesota. And I joined 3M at 27. I started as design coordinator of the company, and I exited the company 10 years later as chief design officer. I was living in the United States in Minnesota, and I left to join PepsiCo and moved to New York. That was 10 years ago.
Wow, what a story, and a lot of history in all that we might be able to dig into. Hey, I was curious, when you talk about some of the things you talk about in your book, some of the aha moments that you've discovered through trial and through learning, and a lot of it, as you mentioned, came from the way your parents raised you about kindness and respect and so forth. Oftentimes, tell me if you found this through your experience. I wasn't planning on asking this, but oftentimes you'll see some people that are working, let's say, on the front line, and then all of a sudden they get a promotion and they get into a leadership role. And all of a sudden, in some cases, pride sets in, and they change a little bit, and they start to lose connection with the people that they used to work with. And now maybe in some cases they lead now. Did you ever go early on in your career, as you were kind of climbing that ladder of success, did you go through some of that where maybe it became about you and achieving, where you kind of lost sight of the things you write about now and in the last 20 years of of your business that you've established?
No, it never happened to me. And I'll tell you probably, as you were asking the question, I was trying to psychoanalyze myself in a
Sure.
second, because I was like, I don't want to sound now that arrogant that I was
for
never
sure.
arrogant, right? I'm so arrogant to say that I was never arrogant. But there is a moment that I remember like if it was yesterday, probably because it was a sort of shock for me. It was a trauma. I was a child, once again, the role of my parents. I was a child. We were in the public gardens, the giardini pubblici of my city, of Varese. And there were those, I don't know how to describe them in English, those toys that you have in a garden. This specific one was like a horizontal ladder that you'll hang on. Okay. And so then with your hands, you go hanging on the ladder from one side to the other.
Right.
Maybe you can describe it better than me.
Are you talking about monkey bars?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So here I am. I wanted to jump in one of those. It was pretty long. And I was, I don't know, probably I was 8 years old, something like this. And I'm there with my parents. Before I can do that, another kid comes and he goes from one side all the way to the other. When you are that young, it's not that easy to go to one side to the other. I mean, you need a little bit of muscles, and it's already an achievement. So here the kid goes. I don't really care about what the kid is doing. I'm just waiting, for my time. And then I go from one side to the other, and then I turn, still hanging, and I go back. I go down, and I see my parents pissed, especially my mom was really pissed. And essentially, they were annoyed by the fact that in their mind, and it was not my intention at all, but in their mind, by doing that, I wanted to humiliate the other kid. And I was not. And I think the reason why I still remember it today is because, when you have not that intention to do something negative and somebody accuses you of something, and it's unfair. That's right. So that's why I still remember it today. But no matter if the accusation was fair or not fair, I don't care. That's an episode reminds me the way my parents educated me. The idea of that arrogance is wrong, that you need to be respectful, that you need to be sensitive to others. And so I always had a little bit of that humbleness inside, but always combined with a profound confidence, being aware of yourself. The Italian poet Dante was always celebrating this quality of confidence combined with humbleness anyway. And because we all, any wise person knows that arrogance is very dangerous, because when you fall in the trap of arrogance, essentially you stop learning, you stop growing. And then there are many people that are extremely smart, very strategic, and they did great things in life, and therefore they achieve certain positions, and then they trap into, they fall into that trap. Right. And no matter the amazing journey they did until that point, that's when they stop learning and they stop growing, as individuals, as human beings. The ability of containing any potential form of arrogance we may have inside is the best gift we can give to ourselves, because it's the gift of, continuous growth and in life.
You say in the book, I quoted this one line I thought was really good. Arrogance isn't just annoying, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
That just says it right there. I love that. I love that you talk about confidence and humility. They can go together. They should go together.
They should go together, because if you just have humility, if you just are an humble person, and you take it to the extreme, and you don't combine that with confidence, that could be a problem as well. You need. Yeah. And the same with kindness, by the way. In many situations when I talk about kindness, I have people that told me, well, often kindness is misperceived, is misunderstood as weakness. And we need to be clear that you can be kind, but you can be also confident and tough. As an example, for instance, it's very important to make a distinction between kindness and being nice. Being nice for the sake of being nice is not kind. If you want to be kind to people surrounding you, for instance, when they do a mistake or they do something that is not okay, the kind person is the one that is able to call out the person, that is able to eventually be tough on the person, to help the person. That's something, that is kind. So all these characteristics that are beautiful to hear, humbleness, kindness, let's make sure they're not taken in isolation, but they're combined with a series of other skills that are very important to make them meaningful and relevant in a positive way for yourself and for the society we live in, and also in the business world for the companies we work for.
And I think, and I read this in the book too, but these attributes that you're talking about, which we'll get into later as well when we talk about unicorns, but they increase trust. And I love, several years ago when I first started my podcast, one of the first people that I asked to come on, it just so happened that he endorsed one of my books and so forth, was Ken Blanchard, the famous leadership guru from many years ago, who wrote 1 Minute Manager. He came onto the podcast and he told a story about when he wanted to run for student body president in the 7th grade. He was so excited. He prepared for it. His dad was an admiral in the Navy. So he came home from school having won to be president of the 7th grade. And he went home to tell his dad. And his dad said, now that you have that position, never use it. And I love that. And it goes to what you were just saying. Be confident, be tough, go for it, burn the midnight oil, stretch your capacity, but then be humble about how you carry yourself. Yeah.
You just mentioned something that made me think about an exercise that we did in the past few weeks with my team. And we saw the results yesterday. Is a tool called DISC, D-I-S-C. I don't know if you heard of it.
DISC profile, yes.
Perfect, exactly. So I was looking at my own profile, and it was very interesting because as the people that knows me may expect where I score very, very high. That is the I, the influencing is my character. You see that the description is exactly me. Then I was looking at dominance, that is the first one, and it was very interesting. Essentially, there are 2 profiles under each of these pillars. So in dominance, there is the natural profile, who you are, and then there is the adapted one, essentially the way you try to project yourself in society. Yes. The natural comes out often when you are in extreme situation of stress or in a crisis, is who you are inside. But the adapted one is the one that you try to be in, even through experiences in life and how you change your inner nature of when you are a kid, to who you are in your life. And so in the dominance part, I was scoring 60, that is in the middle, is a scale between 0 and 100. So it's I, but
it's not at the top.
Contained. Yeah, it's contained. Right. So I'm not a dominant kind of person, but I'm not even the opposite. But then in the adapted one, is very interesting, is the way I project myself into the world. I was 20 points below. I was 40. So that means, I think it's similar to what you were saying earlier, that maybe I have this, instinct of the D is typical of the leaders in corporations. Usually they're all D. Eventually they're not I, but they're all D. And I have it a little bit, but I try to take it down exactly because what you were saying, because I don't want to profit of my position, enabling and empowering certain behaviors that if they're done in the wrong way, they can become really negative. You have so many leaders that are tough and that are rude and that are behaviors that are justified by the position and sometimes even celebrated. Unfortunately, even celebrated. I'll tell you another thing that happened to me this week on Monday. I was at a conference and a renowned design leader from a major corporation, from multiple major corporations in his entire professional journey. He was talking about an experience he had once that when he was in one of these corporations. He went to the office of a very top executive, and he started to talk about design thinking, design-driven innovation. And he was talking and talking. And the guy, at a certain point, he could see that the guy was kind of rigid and serious. And at a certain point, he started to clench his punch, and he punched the table. And he was like, enough with this thing. I don't care at all about design and design thinking and innovation. I care about the bottom line. I care about, driving financial results. You can go out now. And he threw him out of his office. And the guy was telling this story because he was like, oh, that was a great learning for me, because I realized that in that moment, I was just talking about myself. I was just focused on design and the design team and the culture of design. And I didn't understand in depth what was driving this individual, what was really moving him, and what were his goals and his priorities. And so I went out of the room, and I spent, the coming weeks and months and years figuring out exactly how to work with this person. And in general, it was a big lesson for his life. And then he found a way to really, access that person from another direction, and they became amazing partners, and they did great things together in the company. And that was his story. And his story was beautiful. It was the story of empathy and somebody understanding the audience in a different way, but there was a flaw in the story. And I raised my hand, from the public. I was in the conference, and I shared this point of view. I told him, well, this is great, that you were able to find another angle to talk to this person, but we should stop accepting those kind of behaviors. A leader that behave in that way, screaming and sending somebody out of the door, first of all, is not an appropriate behavior. So we should stop justifying people doing that just because they have a title. And because, as you said earlier, they are profiting of their position and their title. Because if they were entry-level employees, they couldn't afford to behave in that way. So they're behaving that way just because of that. We should stop that, first of all, because ethically it's not okay. And it should be done there, finished there. But we know that that's not the world we live in. We need additional reasons. Well, there is a very wonderful additional reason. That guy, by behaving that way, essentially, he was having a major blind spot. He didn't see the unbelievable value that a person with a diverse culture, a diverse way of thinking, a different way of thinking was bringing to the table. He closed himself in his arrogance, and this stopped him from understanding the value that the person was going to bring, not just to himself, to the company. So if you are a company with those kind of leaders, you don't want to have them, because they are close to any kind of different perspective that could add value not just to them, but to their teams and to the company. We need to stop celebrating that kind of behavior that often, especially in some industries, for instance, I'm very close to the fashion industry, these kind of behaviors are everywhere all the time. And the reality is that in the past, where the situation in the business world was much different. You will build a company, you will have this major barrier to entry because there was a very limited distribution. It was you and few competitors. So you could afford the inefficiency of those kind of behaviors, even though many people wouldn't see the inefficiency. They would just see the stardom of those kind of leaders. But you could afford that inefficiency. Today, where you need to move at the pace of light, where you need to be hyper efficient, you cannot afford those kind of behaviors anymore, because they're really unproductive for your company.
Oh, well said. I was working with a transportation company, a trucking company. And as I was doing a private executive call with one of the upper managers of the organization, he said, I started with the founder of the company 30 years ago. And you know what the founder told me? Our job is only to transport goods from one location to the next. And I said, how's that worked out for you, having that kind of a mindset? He goes, you're right, TJ, because they were participating in something we do called the Leadership Academy. And part of it is the executive coaching side. And he says, in the last 10 years, it's become clear to me that even if you're a truck driver, that you have got to put forward the kindness, the respect, the thoughtworthiness, the empathy, and so forth. It's not just about moving goods from one location to the other. And I agree with you. I think in the last several years, that has really been highlighted, that you've got to be people and human centric. And you talk a lot about that in your book. Let me read a quote that you said in the book. Innovation is inefficient by definition. It requires investments that directly impact the bottom line of a company. You need to create innovation. You need to create an innovation team, give them time and resources. You need to invest in new production processes and plants. You need to pour money into communication to produce awareness, adoption, and engagement for the new product. And it's risky. Data shows us that innovation fails most of the time. So my question for you is, what does love have to do with innovation and performance?
Look, it has to do so much in so many different dimensions, and I'm trying to figure out where to start from. Let's start from the very idea of innovation. When innovation was essentially invented, or where it happened for the first time in the history of humanity, that was thousands of years ago, when the first prehistoric man or woman decided to take what nature was giving him or her,
right,
and modify that. So they took a stone, they manipulated, and they transformed the stone first in a tool for hunting, then to prepare their food, then later on to decorate their body and express themselves, and then later on also to celebrate their gods. I just mentioned different kind of uses of innovation early on that essentially cover the entire Maslow pyramid, the pyramid of needs of Maslow. From the bottom, the physiological and safety needs, to the center, self-expression, connection, sense of belonging, connecting with others, all the way to the top, transcending yourself, doing something bigger than you. And all of these needs are all connected by that never-ending search for happiness that our life is, already back then. So this is what innovation is about. Innovation is about creating something that is different from what we are today. So modifying the status quo into something else, transforming into something else, with the goal of satisfying specific needs and wants that at the end lead you to be happy. As such, innovation is an act of love that you do to yourself, if you're innovating for yourself, or to the people around you. In the case of the prehistoric man, we're talking about themselves and the little community that they were living in. Essentially, they were creating something to make the life of them and the people around them easier, more convenient, better in a variety of different ways. Then, they started to produce more and more of these objects and these products. And at a certain point, they needed to delegate it to somebody else. And with this delegation came the idea of work and division of work and societies, and then later on companies, and then later on brands. And with the distance that came out of this delegation between the innovator and the person, love was substituted with profit. And so instead of creating something out of love for somebody else, you started to create something to generate profit for yourself. You still use as an act of love for yourself and your close ones. But the products you're generating are not anymore that act of love. Therefore, we started to be surrounded, especially in the past 100 and 150 years, by a lot of mediocrity in products, in services, in experiences, in brands. And if your company was producing mediocrity and your competitor was producing mediocrity, and that was the standard of an industry, there was not a scale. I mean, you as a consumer, a word that I don't particularly like, as a user, as a somebody buying these products, you will go to a store and it is what it is. Either you buy that or competition is always the same. Today, where anybody can come up with an idea, get easy access to funding for that idea through platforms like Kickstarter.com or through the proliferation of investment funds hunting for the next big idea to build the next startup. We live in the age of the startup. So you get access to money in a much easier way. The cost of manufacturing is going down, driven by globalization and new technologies. You can go straight to your end users through the digital platforms to sell them products, e-commerce, and promote your products, social media. Well, all these areas were the big companies were building their big barriers to entry, made of scale of production, distribution, and communication. So today, to go back to what I was saying earlier, anybody out there can go and compete with the big brands, with the big companies in many industries, not all the industries, but in many industries. This is forcing the big and the small to refocus everything on one variable, that is the human being, the person, really understanding what people need and want and create extraordinary solutions for them. Or if you want to translate it in my life every day, I know today that millions of people, as we are talking to each other, are thinking, how can I take Pepsi down? How can I take the beverage category? How can I enter the category or the food category? And what are they doing? Well, they're looking at those people and they're trying to understand if there is any frustration, any desire that they have that the big companies, the big brands are not fulfilling today. You may have the perfect product, the perfect brand, but your service is not good enough. Or you may have a great product and service, but maybe your proposition is not sustainable, or is not purposeful, or is not healthy, or is not something, it's not customized for me. And that's where they enter. So long story short, innovation started as an act of love. We lost love in the name of profit for many, many years. And today, finally, love is realigning with profit. Or in other words, financial interest is realigning itself with people interest, with human interest, because if you don't create something extraordinary for those humans, you cannot protect your mediocrity with your barriers to entry anymore.
I can tell you would be a great leader to work for. And I know inside you're going, no. But let me tell you, you get it. And I feel like with my books and some of the trainings we do and so forth, I mean, simple things. When I teach an organization to double down and do better with their one-on-ones, with the people on their team, the team members, it's not just about evaluating them and just telling them what they did good and what they did wrong. It's about saying, how are you doing? Tell me about your family. What's working in your world? What's not working in your world? Help me understand you, right? And I think we've lost that, like you said, for profit. We've lost that in the name of getting a result. But you wrote about it in the book. You will get results if you will adopt these qualities into your style. You'll get more connection from people. They'll want to work for you because they believe deeper in the product and deeper in the service. And they enjoy coming to work. We know statistically that most people quit a job, not because of the company oftentimes that they work for, but because of their direct manager. So I think you really speak truth. Wow. How important, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm going to jump ahead here. How important it is to be a good listener.
Oh, that was the perfect question. I was about to talk.
Are you serious? Really?
I'm curious. Yeah, and you did the same. Well, it's so insanely important. And, as you probably understood already, you and the people listening to us right now, I like to talk.
Which is a good thing. I like to talk too, but I'm trying to learn as well.
Exactly. So at a certain point, I realized that because of this character that I have, I found myself in so many situations surrounded by very interesting people in which I was just talking too much. And the more time I was talking, the more time I was wasting in for the opportunity of learning from others. I needed to shut up and listen to others. Listening is so important because essentially it gives you the possibility to open up your mind and change perspective. When you innovate in any kind of situation, and by the way, the innovation I'm talking about applies to any field. It's not innovation just of a product. It's innovation of culture. It's the innovation that you need when you need to drive a company, when you become CEO of a company, business leader, or a sales rep, in a specific area, anything, when you need to change the status quo, that's the innovation I'm talking about. And to do that, we come to that task with our own background, with all the biases of our own background, our story, our life, and our perspective. Listening to others help you changing perspective, and especially listening to people with different opinions than yours or different history than yours. And therefore, some of the most rich conversations that you can imagine are with people that are completely different than you. Even if you think about politics, for instance. I mean, usually when you are in one party and there is a person in the other party, the most of the time is just a challenge to each other, a contrast to each other. If we will listen more to each other, I don't think there is a party that is right and there is a party that is wrong, black and white by definition. There will be always interesting things, interesting point of views in the other party, in the other perspective. And now I mentioned politics, but this is true for everything, unless you are driven by evil intentions. And that's a complete kind of, different situation. But in general, different perspectives help you, not because the other perspective may be better or worse than yours. The value is in the blending of the two perspectives. Right. Perspective one,
that's where the
yours.
Strength is. Yeah,
exactly. You have perspective one, yours. Perspective two, the one of the other person. If you create a dialogue with respect and empathy, something magic happens. You co-create a third perspective that is the innovation perspective, is the original perspective, is the perspective that didn't exist before, that is born out of this dialogue. But you need respect. You need ability to listen, as you said at the beginning. You need to absorb, interpret, elaborate, give it back, see how they elaborate the information you give them. And that's the richness of people that are able to listen, are respectful, embrace diversity, and are comfortable getting out of their comfort zone to eventually change mind and change direction. And I just mentioned 4 of the traits of the unicorns.
Oh, yes. And there are 24 total traits. But
yeah,
but let's see here. When one person has a series of thoughts and they communicate to another person with a series of thoughts, this is not brand new. Almost 100 years ago, the legendary book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill talked about when two people talk and they start communicating, it creates a third intelligence. He called it an infinite intelligence and the mastermind principle, that the strength is when we look at other views, different angles, and we bring those together to make something even better as a result of that. So here's my question for you. As a leader, how do you encourage this openness? How do you go about, what's your style? How do you go about encouraging listening, encouraging embracing new ideas? Is it simply an email that you send out, or is it in your team meetings that you kind of reinforce these ideas so that they get it and they buy into it? What's sort of your style in coaching this forward so that it becomes a culture?
Look, it's a mix of those things and more. For me, the most important thing is the behavior. You need to embody that in everything you do all the
You,
time.
you,
You as a leader. So as a leader, you need to show that you are open to conversation, that you enable people to push back and challenging you, that you are there listening to them and you want them to listen to you as well. And when you come in a room, for instance, especially when you have more junior people inside the room, and here arrived the chief design officer, no matter the people that knows me, that I'm so friendly, accessible, humble, but if you're an entry-level employee and you don't know me yet, and so I, especially in those situations, I always ask people to share their opinions. I always ask what they think about something. I also, when I give that opportunity, I hope they do it by themselves. And sometimes they do,
right.
Thank God, but it's also character, or maybe they know the culture and they just, embrace it. But then I listen to them. I don't just, talk over them. So I think it all starts with embodying that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as you mentioned earlier, it's also important to remind it explicitly. And this is why I decided to write this book. This is why in the past I wrote multiple articles. I gave multiple interviews on these points. This is why I think it was 2008, 2007, more or less, I wrote for the first time down the list of the characteristics of the unicorns. I was not calling them unicorns back then. And it was in principle similar to the one that we have today. But obviously over the years it evolved and I tweaked a few things and everything. But I brought it down. I brought it down for myself, for my HR team, hunting for these talents. But then as soon as possible, I published it in an article for the Design Management Institute. And then I started to talk about this in conferences because I wanted to screen to the world certain characteristics that were necessary for the people that wanted to join this team. So again, embody them in your behavior, reinforce them in all possible ways across all the platform that you have. This platform could be a town hall, a meeting you have with people, an email, but also your public platform, in social media, in conferences, in articles, if you want, in a book as well, so that the message becomes crystal clear for everybody.
And I think you've done a great job with that. What is a unicorn? Why is a unicorn desirable? And how will a unicorn transform the culture? Let me read you something that you said I really like. You might expect some of their qualities. They are dreamers and executors. They are change agents and risk takers. But when was the last time you heard an executive ask prospective hires if they were optimistic, kind, or curious? If they have aesthetic sense or are they humble? If they know how to have fun, or are they storytellers? And yet, in this hyper-accelerated and hyper-connected world we live in, these skills that make a difference, they give a competitive edge to you and your organization to drive quality, excellence, and efficiency. But too many times they are neglected and not considered.
Well, first of all, the unicorn doesn't exist. I just want to make it clear right away. The unicorn, somebody with these 24 skills,
yes,
developed to the extreme, does not exist. Plato would say that the unicorn lives in the world of ideas.
Yes,
the world of ideas. Yeah, exactly. So the world of ideas is where there is the perfection of every single thing we know in the world. In the world is in its imperfect state, and in the ideal world instead is imperfection.
That's right.
So what that means, is a philosophical explanation of a very simple idea, is that those 24 traits should be a sort of lighthouse, is something we want to aspire to. And this is the first truth of trying to be a unicorn. The fact that, as I say in the book, you need to be a student of life a student for life. You need to see your life, every experience, every encounter, every project, anything that happened to you, any misstep and failure, and every success as an opportunity to grow. And you need to do that for the rest of your life. And so this is the starting point. And then there are a series of characteristics. You mentioned it already. Some are less are more obvious. Some other are less. Kindness, optimism, curiosity. How many times, once again, you have these executives asking a prospective hire if he's kind or she's optimist or curious. And yet, if I look at my teams and how they've been able to perform in PepsiCo and in 3M in a very successful way over the years, is because of these common traits that initially, at the time of 3M, were part of my intuition. I was just hiring people with these characteristics because each of us love to be surrounded by people similar to us in a way or the other. And so I wanted to be surrounded by nice people, optimistic people, curious people. Then later on, I realized the value because I was comparing my team with other teams in the organization, outside the organization. I was like, wait a second, this is a superpower that is making the difference. So, for instance, curiosity drives you to embrace those dialogues we were talking about earlier, to get out of your comfort zone and connect with people that think differently from you, to travel from one city to the other for a business meeting, but not just stay in the business meeting room, but getting out. And eventually, if you're lucky, your boss understands the value of getting out, you're getting out, officially on the dime of the company, but else you just sneak out because the curious people is so curious that you cannot be in Shanghai or in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or in St. Paul, Minnesota, and not go out and discover the people there and observe the way they communicate, the way they eat, what they drive, what they do, and you grow continuously. And I saw so many times people that are assigned to very important leadership positions where they are supposed to drive change, that are not curious at all. And there's such a gap. How can you drive change, especially when we talk about change in products, in brands, or in the way you sell stuff to people? You need to understand people, and you need to be an ethnographer 24/7. You cannot rely on the data. Now, there is this trendy word, data, or on the insights of consumer research. You need yourself to feel, even before understanding rationally, to feel the world. And so curiosity drives you in that way. Optimism is so indispensable because if you innovate for real, you will face roadblocks and shut doors all the time. If you don't face roadblocks, it means that you're not innovating. And therefore, if that's your life, unless you're an optimistic person, or you're going to be miserable, it's going to be a disaster. So the innovator needs to be optimistic, also because the innovator is the person that always, in a very optimistic way, see the potential in everything that surrounds him or her. How many people are like, you cannot change that. It's always a no. It is what it is. This company, that's the culture of the company. This is the product. This is the market. This is the industry. The optimistic person instead is always thinking, yeah, this is the culture of the company, but I think I can change it. Yeah. Yes, this is the industry I live in, but I think I can change it. There is always that. And the optimism then push you to build dreams, to have visions, to really think that you can change things. And the vision is very important because in the day-to-day, when you face those roadblocks, the technique that I personally use to manage the complexity of those roadblocks from an emotional standpoint is to try to step back, put things in perspective, be clear, be self-aware about where I came from so that I can see that there has been progress. Because when you face the roadblocks, you forget where you came from and the fact that, wow, you already did a lot of things. And then you look at the dream, and the dream gives you that energy like, okay, I'm in the middle of my way, but I'm going there. like when you are running a marathon or a competition, and you know where you're going, and you know where you're coming from, and in the moment, gosh, it's difficult, but you go because you have that goal. So but you need a kind of optimism. There's a little bit of natural talent, but can be nurtured and growth, but you need to start with awareness about the power of optimism. Or
when I was reading your book and I got into the section on unicorns, I just thought, I resonate with it when I feel like these are such core principles that if people would align themselves with it. I often tell in my leadership trainings, there's a quote I use over and over and over, a quote that I came up with over and over and over. And it says, defy the status quo with dignity. So with kindness and respect, notice if there's a better way to do things. If there's something different you can do, you can add to something, but do it with respect. But we got too many people that are just slumbering in the current culture and way of doing things, that oftentimes they're not thinking about how to make things better. They're just thinking about showing up, doing their job, which is, it's important that they provide an income for their families and so forth, but they don't give that little bit extra. One thing that we're trying to help people do is unleash their greatness by what I think you've described in the unicorns. If you could just develop these characteristics, you have a higher chance of moving upward, of creating value for the organization, and then succeeding long-term, both in life and at work. So the question is, as a leader, in your case, is there a strategy, or how do you go about finding people that, obviously the unicorn doesn't exist. These are ideal principles that we're striving toward, and everybody has different strengths within each one that they're working on. But what do you do? What's your strategy? Do you typically, when you're interviewing someone, rely on your intuition? Do you get a feeling as you ask them questions, or is there another strategy that you use to help sift through people that you may want to bring on your team so that they don't hurt your culture or hurt your team?
Yeah, look, I think it's the most difficult part of my job. I think it's probably the most difficult part of the job of any leader in any organization. I still don't have a solution. If you have something to suggest me, please let me know. This is what I do. And I'm saying this because I keep making mistakes. I keep,
I feel the same way.
Amazing people, and I keep hiring people that eventually are not amazing. And it's a process. And sometimes, when it's not the right fit, anyway, you invest in the person and maybe then they find their way. Sometimes they don't. But long story short, this is what I do. First of all, is what I was saying earlier. I make sure that the people out there understand what kind of people we want. This is the role of this book. This is the role of all the communication I did over the years around this principle, so that if somebody is interested in our company and joining my team and Google my name and do a little bit of research, you understand immediately what kind of people I want. The second thing I do, I wish my instinct and my intuition could be so good that I just catch the unicorns every time. I'm not like this. Unfortunately, I think I am a good reader of people, but still, to understand a person in 1 hour interview or maybe in a couple of interviews is so difficult. So first of all, I triangulate, and I have my leadership team interviewing the people, so that you start to bring into the mix people with similar mindset to mine. So I know that they look for the same things, because if they're in my leadership team, it's because they are, I call myself and all these people aspiring unicorns. So they are like this. But each of the people in my leadership team is very different from one another, really different from one another. So each of them will interview the candidate with a different angle, a different perspective. And so I collect all those information. I try to then talk with people who have been working with a person to hear their point of view. And it's not easy also in that case, because these are all personal experiences, and For more senior profiles, we use a few recruiters that we've been working with for years that know very well what I'm looking for. So that helps as well. So a mix of all of these is what we do. The other thing that is important is when you don't find the right people, you need to be honest with them and with yourself, because the wrong fit is not going to last in the company anyway. So if you drag somebody for years in a company is not the right fit, that person is going to be miserable. You are going to be miserable as a leader if you're a sensitive person, and your team is not going to be as effective as it should be, and you're damaging your company. So it's a disaster for everybody. So when you understand that it's not, somebody is eventually not the right fit, the first thing to do is to invest in the person, time, and trying to correct the direction for a while. When, though, you realize that it's not the right fit and you think that you tried everything you could, then it's important that, the person has the possibility to find their way and be happy also. And you as a company need to be fair with the person. That's extremely important. Often, when you accept a job, you change your life, you invest yourself, your family, everything in the company. So we need to consider all the variables together. Okay. But at the end of the day, the most important one is the right match. If there is not, then we'll find solutions that are fair. But the best solution for everybody is that there is the right match.
I love it. Talk for just a second, a nutshell. Talk about the importance of culture. I wrote in If You Think You Can, you might be the fastest runner in the room, but if you're running through quicksand, you'll never tap the potential that you ultimately have as an organization, as a performance level. What's the power of getting the right people on the team and getting the culture right as it relates to performance?
Well, look, unfortunately, in many companies, we spend so much time and millions of dollars often to talk about the processes, the tools, the ways of working. You hire all these consultants that bring in their methodologies, and those are important. I mean, it's like if you want to paint, you need a brush, you need a canvas, you need the colors. But to spend so much time just talking about the quality of the brush and the bristle and the quality of the paper and the quality of the color, obviously, is a waste of resources. You should spend a lot of time in talking about the person using the brush. If you have Picasso using the brush, the result will be very different than if you have your tax accountant using the brush.
That's right.
And so we should spend time in defining the way of thinking, behaving, feeling of the Picassos, the unicorns, and the collective behavior of all these people form what we call culture. Culture is the most important thing in a company to drive anything, actually, to drive the business, to drive innovation, to drive anything a company does. And I didn't realize until I joined these companies and I stayed in these companies for a few years, how powerful is the executive team, starting with the CEO, to shape the culture. 100%. I witnessed CEOs coming in companies. I remember in 3M, for instance, when Jim McNerney arrived it was 2003, 2004, something like this, how he was able to reshape the culture of the company so quickly around few different directions, around the idea of Six Sigma, and it was incredible. If you know how to do it, in those positions, in the executive positions, you have a lot of power to shape cultures, and this is true at company level with the CEO. But then it's true also if you, like in my case, for instance, I lead an entire function. My role is very important to shape culture. And I need to invest. I want to invest. I do invest so much time in shaping the right culture, because if you do, then everything else comes. Starting with my leadership team. If I want to be effective and efficient in the vision and the dream I have, I need to empower my leadership team because I have just 24 hours per day. I have limited bandwidth, and I can exponentially amplify what I can do and my dream just if I empower the team under me. But to empower them and really enable them to have freedom, I need to make sure that they have the right culture. We need also the right processes and tools and ways of working, but the culture is what defines the way they will behave.
You say here, no process, business model, or strategy would have been sufficient if it weren't managed by the right people with the right characteristics. You write that in the book. That is succinct and clear. And then when you brought up Picasso, I love this. I actually wrote the words, I love this, : and then I quote you. Design thinking is a tool. It's like a brush. Put in Picasso's hands and then put it in the hands of your tax advisor, and the results will be diametrically opposed, at least so long as your tax advisor is not a reincarnation of Picasso. A brush is necessary to be able to paint, just like a canvas and colors, but they are just simple instruments. It's the artist's talent, and I would add here qualities and so forth, that makes the difference. Wow.
Yeah. And then I go on in the book, I don't remember the exact words, but paraphrasing, when we attack design thinking or we attack a process of innovation, whatever is the process, it's like if we are getting pissed and we're attacking the brush for a bad painting. Oh my God, that bad painting. What is the brush? What kind of brush did they use? Instead of being like, was that Picasso or somebody else? But so many times you're like, as a designer, I've been witnessing this, people attacking design thinking because it didn't succeed as they were expecting. It didn't solve all the problems of the world in specific companies. And I'm like, why? I mean, design thinking is a tool. Don't attack the tool. Try to understand what kind of mistakes were done in using the tool. But the design thinking tool is pretty powerful. It's pretty good. Essentially, it's just telling you, focus on people and understand 3 dimensions: the people themselves, and they need to be at the beginning, at the center, at the end of everything you do. And then we call it desirability, and then the viability, the business dimension, and the feasibility, the technological and manufacturing dimension, and use this double diamond approach of diverging and converging, testing and learning, prototyping and learning, and then to tweak your ideas, to evolve them, and to transform them in something that is relevant, meaningful to people, goes to market, and is successful. So the tool is obviously a good one, and it's a tool that is screaming to the world, we need to be human-centered. So it's obviously a good one. Now, the problem is, if you tell companies that if they apply design thinking, they're going to be successful, and if you forget to talk about what kind of design thinkers you need, that's why design thinking fails. But no, it's not design thinking, it's the wrong application or the wrong interpretation of what design thinking is. It's like to give a brush to a company and be like, okay, now paint me something like Picasso will do, or Canova or Michelangelo. And the company is like, okay, now that I have the super brush, I'm going to give it to anybody, and for sure, anybody in the company will be able to create those kind of pieces of art because you have the super brush that we pay millions of dollars, because you gave it to me. No. We need to spend time talking about people. And it happened, just to be clear, these companies have big HR organizations, sure. and then they have coaches like you and people that understand, about people. The problem I'm talking about is when you identify a business, an innovation opportunity, you try to figure out how to change the status quo of a situation that is challenging for your company, and you place general managers that are really good eventually at managing businesses, or you place people that eventually did a very good career in that company in a successful way for a variety of different reasons, but you don't understand that you need specific kind of skills to drive innovation in a successful way. And you don't focus at all on identifying those skills, but you focus all the time and resources in defining the ways of working and the processes they need to use. And that's the problem, I think.
You just got me burning up inside, right? So I interviewed on the podcast a couple years ago, Bihar, I'm forgetting his first name right now, president and CEO of Starbucks Coffee Company, taking it from 28 stores to 15,000, Howard Bihar, to 15,000 stores. And he wrote a book called It's Not About the Coffee. And I love that. It's about the people. It's about the qualities. Would you agree with this thought? You could have less of a magical brush or the perfect brush, but rather a lot of heart from the people, and the heart will always outweigh the tool itself. Do you agree with that? I
completely agree. This is the way I've been building my own organization. At a certain point, I started from scratch. There was nobody at the beginning of my journey in PepsiCo, and we have today 300 designers, 15 design centers. So I had to take trade-offs on the way, and I sacrificed processes, tools, ways of working in the name of the genius of certain people that could change the game in a very intuitive way.
Yes.
With a very clear strategy, building proof points as soon as possible. Because the moment you build proof points through, that intuitiveness, through the heart, as you were describing it earlier, then the company will realize that there is value in what you're doing and will give you the resources to start to scale it up. So I think beginning heart, even if you need to sacrifice processes and tools, at a certain point, you do need the processes and tools when you need to scale up, because scale up requires discipline, requires strategy, requires processes and tools. But the problem is that because everybody knows this, when you try to scale up something, it could be, like in my case, a capability, a function, but it could be also a small company that you acquire, that your company acquires, a new venture. You start to infuse all these processes and tools, and the risk is that you kill the heart.
Yes.
And the good leader is the one that is able to balance processes and tools with heart, giving space to the heart, to the intuition. Because at the end of the day, the real innovation, the extraordinary innovation comes most of the time from the heart, the intuition.
Agreed.
And also from the mistakes that a little bit of freedom can empower to happen. How many products, out there, for instance, I used to work for 3M, the Post-it notes is one of those. How many products were born out of a mistake, out of empowering people to do things out of a process? The 15% rule that 3M has, the idea that every employee can do whatever they want with 15% of their time. And I brought that rule also to PepsiCo. So my team has the same kind of opportunity. Do whatever you want with 15% of your time. Well, in the 15% of his time, the inventor of Post-it decided to use a technology that he was experimenting with in the company, a glue that was not sticking, too much, to develop the Post-it notes that he used as a tool to mark the pages of the book that he was using in his choir in church. So he will need to identify all the different pages where he had the song to sing in a very easy way. So he developed these pieces of paper with this glue that was not sticking too much, so you could remove. And that's how he invented the Post-it notes in the 15% of his time, leveraging a technology developed in-house. And then there is much more that he did, because that's when you invent the product. Then from that product to become a real product in a company that goes to market, it was not just about the quality of the product, but it was about convincing the rest of the organization to do it, and prototyping and making it happen, and failing and identifying visionary leaders that would embrace it. It took 10 years from the invention of the Post-it to the real launch, successful launch in market of the product.
On my iPad, the last couple weeks as I've been traveling, I've been watching the biography of George Lucas and building Star Wars. And there's a new kind of series, TV show, where they go back in time and show all the early footage called Light and Magic. And that first episode, it was so clear to me that they did not have a perfect set of tools. But what they had was imagination. What they had was heart. And you find in that biography, they were doing things that had never been invented before, that people just dreamt up in the middle of the night and then brought it in the next day and figured out a way to do it. They were breaking ground on a lot of these processes and procedures that have now impacted the world of film ever since. And it just goes to show, I just want to emphasize the point that getting the heart right and getting the vision involved and so forth will outweigh the tool. But I agree with you, there has to be focus points. We have to take the heart, we have to take the vision, the inspiration, the optimism, and so forth, and we got to pour it into what I'm hearing you say. We got to pour it into results, because in the end we do have to get results, but you can get results with love, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. You need to, at the end of the day, is the history of humanity, this eternal tension between heart and mind, between rationality and emotions. And once again, here we are talking about this. Is the heart, the intuition, the emotion that drives you to change the world and to identify solutions that are totally unexpected, that are really demonstrating your love for the people you serve, for the society, for the planet, for the world. You need all of that. But if you just have that and you don't know how to channel it within processes and strategies, then the business ecosystem won't be able to extract value out of it, and therefore won't be able to make it, your ideas, accessible to billions of people.
But a leader has got to encourage it, because it's a great starting point. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And you need both. And too many times, these companies, this world is prioritizing the processes, the rational part. You see it also in the
status
leaders,
quo,
those MBA kind of profile, it's not on, and instead of the heart and the vision and dreams and the emotions. And I think it's so wonderful that a company like PepsiCo, and look, I'm never there promoting the companies I work for in podcasts or books. Is really not my nature. I'm saying this in a very authentic way. It's so wonderful that this company is giving somebody like me with my profile, even in the disc, my profile is totally an anomaly, the possibility to have a seat at the table, to have such a high position in the company, to have multiple vice presidents under me, so multiple executives under me, in an industry like food and beverage. I mean, we're not in fashion where you can expect eventually design, even if it's a different kind of design, to be there. So I think what we're doing in this company is the demonstration that you can produce very tangible, concrete, financially driven results for a company, growth, with the heart, with kindness, with optimism, with what we call human simplicity.
You say, this is great. Let's go toward the end with this. I mean, I feel like we could talk for another hour, and I would love to, but I respect your time. And so, wow. You say this: if you believe that kindness is not a necessary ethical value in the business world, or is insignificant, then quite simply, this saddens me. And I'm sorry for you, your company, your community, and the people dear to you. The people who surround me in my private life are, in general, kind people. I have rejected, unkind, negative, malevolent, untrustworthy, and insincere people, I assume, in the past. I just think you, in the way that you've articulated today, you've got a vision for better leadership, and you're showing that forward. And I'm glad that you wrote a book emphasizing it. And like I said in the beginning, I wrote this down at the end. For anyone reading this book, and I encourage everyone who's watching this podcast to get this book and digest it and think about it and consider it, experiment with it, and then go to work to become what you talk about as the ideal unicorn traits. I say you are going to find by the end of this book, Mauro, wait, let me say her name right. Mauro. Sorry, brother. I never learned how to roll my R's very good, so I'm sorry about that. He tells you exactly what type of employee or team member ideally you want to be to get ahead in your career. But I write, but frankly, if you want to get ahead in life, you've got to align with and operate from these principles of the ideal unicorn. And don't take yourself too, I heard in the book, don't take yourself too seriously. Love first, love wins. And when you can tie that love into your product, into your service or whatever, then everybody wins, including the profits of your organization. Hey, let me ask you, what are some of your last thoughts? And then would you also mention, hey, where people can find out more about you? And will you mention where they can get your book?
Look, somehow is already inside what you just said a second ago.
Yeah.
We live in a world where finally the interest of humanity is aligning more and more with the economic interest of companies and entities of any kind. I wish that we wouldn't even need that alignment. Yes. I wish that by practicing this idea of the unicorns, of optimism, kindness, curiosity, and all these values, we will realize how beautiful is a world made of this kind of people. It's not just about the economic profit and the business growth that this can generate. Obviously, we talk about this because they're powerful ideas to drive the world to embrace this kind of values. But I really wish that the moment we start to practice them more, we realize how just beautiful they are and how beautiful it is to live in that kind of world. Because if everybody would embrace those kind of values, we wouldn't have conflicts today. We wouldn't have racism and these kind of challenges in our society. So again, I hope that this alignment with the business world for this kind of values is going to drive a new awareness in the society about the needs of these values, no matter the business growth that they can eventually also generate. How to find me? I'm very, very active in social media, especially in Instagram, Mauro Porcini, and in LinkedIn, Mauro Porcini as well.
We'll put that up on the bottom in post-production for sure. We'll put your links down below. Just a thought. Maybe it's a little bit of a strong thought, so you don't have to answer it. But in the spirit of diversity, you write about diversity in the book. And I agree with your spirit of how you wrote about diversity, and let's add to it inclusion. Yeah. But oftentimes, what we're being sold as inclusion, for example, isn't always inclusionary. Right? It seems to me at the core of diversity, at the core of inclusion, has to include respect and kindness and love and empathy and so forth. That if that's at the root, then everything above it will work. But sometimes you see, just don't have to watch the news very much just to see that sometimes it can get pretty crazy out there in terms of people not being accepting of someone else's view of the world or their view of how to do things and so forth. And what a beautiful place it would be, if I read your book correctly, what a beautiful place it would be if we could just base it on kindness and respect and some of those other qualities. And you know what, we'll all win in the process. Any thoughts about that?
Well, no, look, I agree. I think sometimes all the conversations we're having in diversity are led in a direction that make us blind about the real problems. No matter the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender, your political preferences, no matter all of that, in the world, there are people that are nice people and people that unfortunately are malevolent. They are not nice. And by the way, I hope they were not born like this, but it's just life led them in that direction. But it is what it is. And there are people that are particularly sharp and people that somehow, for the circumstances of life, are not that sharp. And there is a form of ignorance eventually in certain people. And so when you combine negative intent, malevolence, with also the inability to decodify what's going on in the world with the right intellectual tools, you generate something that is negative for the world. And this negativity can come from any community, from any person with any kind of color or skin or gender or political preference. And so I think what you were trying to say, but anyway, what I think is that we should condemn every time any lack of kindness, any lack of respect, any lack of dialogue, because no matter your position, if you don't use love in pushing forward your ideas, at the end of the day, you end up damaging not just the other community, but mostly your own cause, your own community. And so even if you are driving a right cause, but you do it with violence, you do it without kindness, you do it without love, at the end of the day, you won't win. Your positive, amazing, wonderful cause will fail. And so use the right tools to advance the right cause. If you use the wrong tools, it's wrong. And you won't win, and you will damage your own community.
Well said. You just are an example to me, as I've read your book and felt the spirit of the type of person you are just in this podcast. I just scribbled down here while I was looking up. You are an example that you can get ahead and be kind at the same time.
Yeah.
It was a joy. It was a pleasure. It was thought-provoking. I feel blessed to have had you on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I think these principles need to be spread throughout this world to remember we're all human beings, or hopefully human becomings, all trying to be better, not in competition with each other, but in competition with our own best self. Always just trying to be that better human being that we can all become. And I think you've articulated that here today.
You say something so powerful, and then let's close. You say, I love it, not in competition with each other, not trying to win. I really don't like when in the business world you use words like winning, because winning implies somebody is going to lose. Yeah. Instead, if you think about how to create value, how to create something amazing, something purposeful, at the end of the day, once again, how to create value for people out there, then obviously, you're not naive. You're working in a business and everything. You want the business to grow, but you are driven by creating value for the society, not to win against somebody else. It's a completely different perspective. It's the difference between human centricity and business centricity. And this is very important. Words are really powerful.
Words are powerful. Let's end on that. Thank you very much for being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really a pleasure.
Me too.
GreatnessWithin.com.